Statement of Anna Ellis regarding the disappearance of her friend while on vacation in Dawnbrook. Statement taken directly from subject while being interviewed by the head archivist and our assistants on February 10th, 2025. Audio recording by Dyal Turner, head archivist of the Moonwalker Archives and Museum, Dawnbrook, Washington. Statement begins. Right, so, I'm a student. I major in statistics, which I guess puts a bit of an ironic twist on my gambling tendencies. Not that I'm addicted, I just found it a fun way to blow off steam, and feel like I'm putting my eventual degree to use in my day-to-day life. But after what happened to Josh, I doubt I'll ever gamble again. Whenever we have time and money to burn, a very occasional thing in this day and age, me and a group of my friends would come from the University of Washington, heading here, Dawnbrook, to rent out a cabin, do some hiking and camping, take a vacation. Typically there are 4 of us, but 2 of my friends, Katie and Andre, were too bogged down with studies at the time, so that just left Josh, Fleet, and I. The 2 of us were close, but not like that. It was complicated. I often felt like we were tiptoeing around committing to a relationship. Anytime either of us would be close to ever bringing it up, something just stopped us. I felt too cowardly to take that risk, I guess. But I thought maybe this trip could have done something for us. We ended up settling into our cabin. Our visits to Dawnbrook are, again, only occasional, but enough to where we befriended some of the business owners in the area. Josh and I split up for a bit to chat to some of them. He was into fishing, so we drove over to say hello to some of the guys over at the Tyson place. I went to the Mayflower grocery store near the apartments. It was a little more pricey than the big Walmart just a few miles away, but I found that I appreciated the smaller size of it. And the fact that the woman on the register and I actually got along and chatted now and then. After saying hi to the folks and regrouping, it was the evening. Josh and I had decided to head to the Double Barrel Bar and Grill. It was more empty than usual. Just a couple of people watching football on the TVs in a corner, drinking by themselves. We said hi to the bartender, who I only know the first name of, that being Sandra. And we chatted for a while, caught each other up, let her know that Andre and Katie couldn't make it this week, it's just me and Josh. She told us that it's a slow evening, and if we wanted, we could play some cards. Playing cards and, as I mentioned earlier, gambling, was a bit of a tradition for us. We're no official casino, and I don't know if you need a formal license to do what we do, but we just put $50 each on the table at most. Even if we were busted, I doubt the cops would give enough of a damn to charge us for illegal gambling. It was mostly just to have fun and make for white noise as we'd chat. And we did, for about 30 minutes. Josh suggested poker, so we played that for a while. Sandra told us about her life, how soon she'd be taking over the bar itself, and someone else would be hired on as bartender. We congratulated her, especially after knowing how long she'd worked there. Climbing the corporate ladder is not easy, but I imagine that's even harder for a local business, which usually runs on soft-core nepotism, I suppose is a phrase. We kept playing until Sandra said she had to at least keep looking busy. Then Josh said he had to run to the bathroom, so I just sat at the table, indulging occasionally in my chips, salsa, and queso, scrolling around online to see if my Twitter, or X, whatever the hell it's called, has any neat updates aside from rage baiting and ads I could not care less about. When a man walks up to me. He was Caucasian, had a bit of an unkempt beard, though not outright messy. He was almost dressed like a budget, old-timey detective from some 60s novel, with his black coat draped down to behind his knees, with the symbol of 2 playing cards and dice rolling a pair of 6s embroidered on the right side of the chest. But everything else under it was strangely modern. His t-shirt was that of some recent anime I don't recall, and his jeans looked more in the style of today's clothing styles rather than well, a 60s crime novel detective. I asked him if he needed anything, initially put off by his approach. But he just asked me, "Do you care for a game?" He drew out a couple of $20 bills from his pocket, flashing me this grin that maybe he thought was reassuring, but only added to his bizarre nature. I wouldn't have entertained it if not for the fact that I trusted Sandra, and that Josh was just in the bathroom and would be out at any minute. That, and I felt strangely compelled. Aside from the money, something in me just wanted to play, and win. So I said, "Sure, what game?" He said, "Any you wish." So I chose blackjack. That was always my go-to. In casinos, if your goal is to actually make some money, blackjack is always the correct choice. And as the best odds out of any card game you can play in most, that being nearly 50-50 split between wins and losses, I figured I could try these odds on the strange man, who I just think of as the dealer, because that's the exact role he jumped right into, acting as my dealer while playing this game. It went rather smoothly. I bet low at first, as if I were feeling out the waters, dipping my toe into the pool, even though that's not exactly how the game works. It still is just luck, just better than other games. But soon I became more bold. There were ups and downs throughout this game, but once I doubled the amount of money I put into it, I told him that was all. He thought for a moment, eyes narrowed, and then he nodded, like he had decided those were acceptable terms for me to declare victory on. He thanked me before walking right out of the bar. I could not tell you how long we were playing for, but it felt like it should have been more than enough time for Josh to have finished up. But a minute after the dealer left, Josh came out of the bathroom, wiping his hands. I joked about him falling in, where he then laughed and told me he was barely in there. I rolled my eyes, teased him, but soon enough the night went on. With the money I won burning a hole in my wallet, I offered to pay her for our dinner. While he refused at first, he eventually conceded, after telling him I just won a good game of cards, and I had plenty more to spend now. We ate, then drove to our cabin. That's where I told him about the dealer. I regret this. Not only because I feel that night we could have taken a step towards a relationship and I ended up turning the conversation elsewhere, but because I believe I may have caused whatever happened to him next. He seemed curious about the dealer, like he wanted to get as lucky as I did. He said that if he ever saw him, he challenged the stranger to a game of cards. We laughed, thought nothing of it, and soon decided to call it a night after watching TV. My dreams that night were odd. I don't remember much, but I recall being in a casino, surrounded by people I don't know. That's normal in a casino. You rarely actually know everyone unless if you come in with friends, but for some reason that stuck out in my mind. The fact that I knew nobody around me. And it only occurred to me moments later that every single person around me was wearing that same black coat the dealer had been, though of course none shared his face. That's all I remember before waking up. I had apparently slept in since it was already about 12 p.m. Josh left me a text at 11:30 saying that he was going to drive around for a bit and he'd be back soon, so he was likely going to be a while. I texted him back saying I was awake now and that I'd be down to make plans for the rest of the day. In the meantime, I just watched TV. It was another hour before he came back. I was concerned at some point since he had not returned my text, but I figured maybe he was driving, and out of the whole friend group, he was probably the most responsible driver, so I wasn't exactly worried about him getting into a crash. I asked him what kept him, and he stared out of the window almost pensively. He said he thinks he ran into the man that I saw. He was driving a circle around Blue Mirror Lake when he saw someone walking down the sidewalk. He thought nothing of it before the man waved Josh down. He stopped and rolled down his window. A According to Josh, the man wore the same thing as the night before. Anime shirt, jeans, and that black coat. And asked, "Do you care for a game?" Josh said he didn't know what he was thinking exactly. It just felt rude to deny it. He told the man sure, and he pulled his car over. They ended up playing poker on the hood of his car. According to him, it went about as swimmingly as a game of poker tends to, which is to say, not at all. He lost $30 out of it before calling it quits. The dealer just smiled, nodding at him, and said, "Oh well, good game," in a croaking, rumbling voice that I can also corroborate, before turning back and walking along the sidewalk without so much as a goodbye. Josh said he felt uneasy after that, and had the whole drive back to the cabin. I told him it would be alright, he's just some weirdo that probably wants to fulfill a gambling addiction, and that I made much more than $30 out of him. We could drive elsewhere and take our minds off of it. And we did, for the most part. We played at the arcade near the fancy houses, even drove a little ways out of town, about an hour away, to visit some peers and spend some time at the boardwalks. Playing some of the games they had on it, winning a cute spider plushie from a crane game, enjoying a Ferris wheel. But when the sun started to lower, we went back to the cabin. By then, the dealer was the furthest thing from our minds. We said goodnight, and I think that was the closest we'd ever gotten. On the king-sized bed, we usually slept separately, but that night, he dared to wrap an arm around me, which I gladly accepted before falling asleep. But in the middle of the night, I woke up due to a thump from downstairs. Josh was not in the bed. I got up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes as I walked down the steps. I spotted Josh near the front door, muttering under his breath as he peered out the window leading to the front yard. He jumped when I mumbled his name. He said he thought someone was out there, somebody was tapping against the glass of the door. When he approached, apparently that man was out of reach, further down in the street, staring at him. I took a look and saw nothing in the road, just the other log cabins, the woods, and distant lights of the city's nightlife. I told him we should go back to bed and we'll be fine. Mostly for his assurance than any doubt we were in danger. It's possible that he had a bad dream. I've occasionally had those dreams where they sort of blend into your waking life and you're not sure where the dream ended and your waking moments began. And it didn't help that, while rarely, Josh was known to sleepwalk whenever we went on vacations like this. I thought at the time that it could just be the unfamiliar bed. He eventually conceded and joined me in bed. When we woke, he was thankfully there. But despite the fact that he slept, it clearly didn't do him much good. He still had bags under his eyes, paired with this unnatural mania. His gaze darted all around. He kept looking over his own shoulder. Even when he was backed up into a corner, he kept glancing backward, just in case. I made him a cup of coffee in the hopes that it'd help, but caffeine can only take you so far. We tried to go about our day, shopping around and deciding that we'd stay in. He was distant throughout the whole thing, a far cry from yesterday. But a bad night's rest can do that to people. I figured maybe a later nap could fix him right up. It didn't. He started staying close to me, though not in a doting way. It was more like a child. One terrified of losing sight of his mother, or else those white van driving kidnappers he always hears about would finally get him. He looked at me long enough to just confirm I was there. Then he'd start scanning around us. This went on all day. I asked him if he's okay, and he'd play it off initially. But at about 5 that evening, I asked him again. He finally admitted he thinks someone is stalking him, specifically the dealer. Now, I know full well what it's like to be stalked. I didn't want to downplay it, but that man had a very particular sense of fashion. One I'd recognize out of everyone in the town. If he was following us, I thought I'd have seen him at some point. I made the mistake of saying that. I get it now. If I had been told that now, I'd feel isolated further. He snapped, saying I don't understand, and I guess in this particular case I didn't. I asked him to calm down, which, yeah, you can imagine how that went. After some back and forth arguing, he said he needed a moment. Without another word, he hopped in his car and drove off. That was the last I ever saw him. At least, him as himself. I let him have his space for an hour, but after 2, I grew more concerned. I texted him, and I actually got a notification that he read the message, but he never responded. I texted him again, another hour later, this time apologizing and saying that if he was worried we were being stalked, we could go back home early. Another read message, gone unanswered. My concern turned to genuine fear, and I rang up the police station. Told them my friend was missing and that he might have someone following him. I omitted the fact that my messages were being read just in case it deterred them from executing a search, thinking that we were just having a couples argument, and he just needed to go out and blow off steam. Trouble in paradise. But I'm glad I omitted that. A cop came to my cabin and questioned me on what happened. I told him the Cliff Notes version of the story. He thought he was being stalked. Argument, and he drove off, and was supposed to be back ages ago. He nodded and told me my cabin would have some security watching over. I don't typically trust cops, but this was the one scenario where I'd take anyone being nearby so that I didn't have to be alone. By some miracle, I managed to fall asleep that night. But I woke up to some bad news. The police outside my cabin, who had parked there to watch overnight, were getting ready to turn in. But they notified me that they had found Josh's car, pulled over on the east road near the lake. Nobody inside of it. Door wide open like he had abandoned it. I called Andre and Katie. I told them what was happening in the midst of a sobbing fit, and they reassured me that the police and park rangers could track him down. I don't think they quite heard the full story I attempted to give them in the midst of my hyperventilating, but they stood with me until I calmed down. I just kept them on as long as I could, but they had work to get to. I didn't want to hold them hostage purely to hear their voices, as much as it gave me comfort. After an hour, they hung up, but they told me to call them if an emergency came up. I waited in the cabin for a while. Thankfully, the owner of the business, Dixon, of Dixon Cabins himself, caught wind of what was happening and told me he'd refund today and the rest of the week I had originally booked. It was a nice gesture, I guess, but I wasn't really thinking about money at the time. Soon the police turned up again, alerting me that they found his phone deep in the woods to the east, 7 miles away from the car. I think after hearing that, I just knew that I wouldn't be seeing Josh ever again. The rest of the evening was tense. Andre and Katie told me they'd drive up tomorrow morning and pick me up. I didn't know what to do with myself. I just turned on the TV to have something resembling noise to fill up the now silent space around me. Come nighttime, another police cruiser was parked outside to watch the front door for any stalkers. The night was mostly just depressing and lonely, until I heard a tap at the kitchen window. Nails flicking against glass, making a subtle enough noise to grab my attention. The light from the cabin barely illuminated the source of it outside. I saw Josh's face. Expression blank, face pale, brows furrowed, eyes glued to me from beyond the glass. I nearly sobbed with relief when I saw him before realizing he was wearing that jacket with the dice and cards. Under it, exactly what he was wearing when he drove away. After getting my attention, he pressed his hand against the glass, moving his face close enough to be heard before cracking a wide grin and saying, "Do you care for a game?" In a deep, croaking voice that was absolutely not his own. I screamed, tripping backwards and falling onto the tile floor. By the time I stood up, Josh was gone again. The police must have heard me scream because they ran up right to the door, quickly opening it with the keys the owner gave them, weapons drawn before asking me what happened. I told them that someone was watching me out the window, omitting that he, or it, had the face of Josh. They looked around and, thank God, actually found evidence that someone was back there. A smudged handprint against the glass from the outside was enough, as well as some shoe prints, but neither pointed to any real suspect in the end. They did, however, get another cruiser out there to watch the back of the cabin. Their search for stalkers nearby fetched no results. That morning, Andre and Katie picked me up as promised. They took me back to Seattle. I never saw Josh again. I never intended on coming back until I heard about you. I thought you guys were just some fringe weirdos with a spooky theme made to attract tourists, but maybe you're the only people who can figure this thing out. If Josh is at all alive, somehow, maybe you can bring him back. I don't know, but I hope you can at least see where this starts and ends, that's all. Statement ends. I'm afraid that I don't have the heart to tell our dear Anna Ellis that we will not be able to bring Josh back. It's quite longer than I anticipated. Surely, who or whatever is listening to this statement doesn't mind if I... Apologies. Just need something to wet the whistle. Anyhow, following up on this investigation took us to some places a little further out than we expected. The friend at the Double Barrel Bar and Grill, Sandra, is likely Sandra Boyd, who after the month since this incident took place, now owns the establishment. She gave us the security footage to view from that evening. All is just as Anna reported it to be, until when she claims to have played the game with the dealer. At this point, the camera cuts to static for 3 seconds before returning to life. In the midst of that static, we could make out very faintly the image of Anna seated across from a dark, human-shaped figure facing away from the camera. The possibility of that man approaching, them talking and playing a game before he leaves happening in the span of 3 seconds must be related to some ability it has, but we don't know the specifics. Aside from that, we determined that the jacket once belonged to the Fuzzy Dice Casino, an establishment 15 miles east of Dawnbrook that in 2008 had closed down after the tragic suicide of its owner, Kyle Burrows. Happening after his complaints about an obsessive stalker that somehow managed to sneak past security, break into his office, and then constantly ask to play a game. No evidence of this occurring was ever found, and the police had nothing to do. People chalked that and his eventual self-inflicted gunshot wound to a mental breakdown following his divorce just a year prior. Our team investigated the abandoned casino, finding it mostly rotting away, covered in graffiti. Recovered from the casino was a deck of playing cards, found in an otherwise empty safe within Kyle Burrows' office. Seemingly innocuous at first, it is now being held in artifact storage due to 2 aspects. One, that 52 hours after the artifact's recovery, Josh Fleet's corpse was recovered. Found by police nearby the Blue Mirror Lakes campsite, laying flat on the ground. Cause of death was attributed to cardiac arrest. 2 was that, well, one of the cards, the King of Spades, I can't help but notice has a strong resemblance to one of our investigators. I believe that it may signal a potential target, especially considering that these investigators had a brief run-in with what they believe is the remains of Josh prior to his corpse's recovery. They made it out safe enough and relatively unscarred, but according to them, they threw hands with it briefly before trapping it. I keep telling the higher-ups that they're not ready. Though I suppose nobody is when they first encounter this stuff. Well, that is all. Statement ends. Hope you enjoyed your little listen. Hey there, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Anything helps. I've been kicking myself back into gear to make things more consistently and just put myself in that working more mindset on this channel. And lately I have been hosting a Magnus Archives tabletop game set in my own universe, where instead of the Magnus Archives, it is the Moonwalker Archives, and there's a lot of lore behind that and stuff, and I just kind of wanted to make something based off of that from the head archivist's point of view as he reads off one of the statements that my players actually went through, and he comments on what they've seen and stuff at the end. So that's kind of what that was, but it was a lot of fun putting together, and yeah, thank you for listening. And at the moment, I've been making a bit of a backlog just to have things go live for when I go on vacation, just to kind of let things keep being uploaded on the channel in my absence. But yeah, that's pretty much it for now. And I want to give a special thanks to all my patrons and YouTube members on the Captain and higher tiers, including Ravioli Senpai, Outer, Jenga Power, Jamie, Tonya Myrick, Jimma, Rachel Brooks, and Crowned Creature. Thank you. Anyways, that's it for now. I'll see you guys later. Thank you for listening. And yeah, that's pretty much it.